Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about lists and arrays and how they are different and why do we actually use them and how to iterate over them and access them and various kind of these things. So let's get started. So firstly, what we have to understand that when we're dealing with variables, sometimes one variable is not enough for a program. We normally have a bunch of things that we have in store when we are making a script or running a program. For example, there might be a list of coordinates for a map or a list of people that we are iterating over and doing some calculations, a list of heights of those people. So there we are dealing with a bunch of numbers, and when we have many of these variables, we cannot store each of those readings. Like if, for example, if we are using heights of a certain 10 or 20 people in an area, then we cannot store each of the heights in a different variable. We can do it, but it's not programmatically uh, efficient. So that's why we tend to use what we call in programs lists on arrays. So lists are generally I will discuss the difference between specific what does lists and arrays have in common and why are they called differently. So let's move in a more in depth into that field. So, in normal, programming, in other types of programming, for example, in C, Java, uh, mm, you might have heard the term array, and lists are more more a modern term and mainly used in Python. There are arrays in Python as well, but um, uh, what Python have natively are lists. So let's see what the main differences are. For example, we have data types. For example, a list can store many things inside of it. So a list is normally constructed by square brackets, uh, and it normally has different kinds of data. Like it can store different kinds of data in it. For example, it can store a string, a character, a number, or even a Boolean value. So it can store different kinds of variables or data types inside of, and this is considered one list. An array, on the other hand, are can store only one type of data. It can be only floating point numbers or only uh, integer numbers or only strings. So these are tightly bound. So array has to be defined for a specific data type, where lists can store many different data types inside of that one list. For this reason, lists are very memory inefficient because these contain a lot. This carries a lot of memories for each of the variable. Because, for example, if this specific is value, like it is just a character, but if it was the name of person, it would have to have different memory addresses for each of the character inside of the string. So as it grows larger and larger, lists have a different memory management system, and it's not typically very efficient because it tends to take a lot of memory to um, store a list. You can also have lists within a list, because like this is just an example, but this value, the first value of this list is itself. Okay, so this is the first element of this list is itself actually a list. So lists can store lists within that list. So that's what I'm trying to make you understand. So whereas in array it has a very homogeneous structure, so that means it can store in a very memory efficient way. So this is better for training neural networks and stuff, because when we're training neural networks we have to deal with a lot of data, and that's why arrays are more used in terms in that field. And that's the reason we can say that the list is particularly a bit slower than array, because these are very memory inefficient, and needs a large amount of memory to hold. So that can also be thought of, that lists are very slower and arrays are more typically faster to process. All right. So when we understand difference between the lists and arrays, we can move into like some points which should be mentioned when we're dealing with lists and arrays. So let's move on to that section. Cool. So when we have a list, for example, when we have this list, for example, uh, this is a typical. So this is a typical example of a list. So we can have like an entire string inside of a list, a character, some types of special characters and numbers and so on. We can have another list inside of a list as well. So that's why a list becomes very much memory inefficient, and it takes a lot of memory to store the values of a list. Whereas when we use arrays, arrays could typically store just one type of value, and that's why they are very much efficient. And when we tend to use for neural networks, we have to deal with lots and lots of numbers for the weights and biases of each of the neural networks. And that's why array is typically used, where we store all of the floating point numbers inside of array and do some calculations, and those typically tend to be much more faster than lists. Whether it be lists or arrays, we can perform various actions inside of them. For example, here you can see a list which is sorted. Sorted means that it is going ascending, like the numbers are increasing order. We can apply some of some algorithms to actually reverse it, so that this becomes a reversed ordered list. Also, there are algorithms, there are like pretty famous algorithms which you should actually learn more about, are called the sorting algorithms, which are used most primarily on lists and arrays. Which what it does is, when you have an unsorted list, meaning that the numbers are jumbled up together, when you perform the sorting algorithm, it typically sorts all of the numbers together, and you have what you call a sorted array or sorted list. So you can do those specific actions in an array or a list. Another thing is indexing, because when you have the list, for example, this list is called list A. So we are this is a variable A, and the variable A is a list, and we are giving the value of this list to variable A. So what we can do is, if we say that uh, A of 2, this would actually give number 4, this value as the output here. Why? Because this is what we call indexing an array or indexing a list. The number here represent which number item we are trying to access from the array. So if we say A is A of 0, so typically the indexing starts from the number 0, because that's the base, which is considered as in programming, the base. The 0 is the first element, which would give us 6. This would give us 5. This would give us 4, and so on. So this is what we call indexing. So whatever we have in an array, so for example, if we have 100 different numbers in an array, and we want to find a specific item in the array, which we know that it is in the 4th position or in the 6th position or the 100th position, we can do we can very well, very easily we can access those items from any lists or arrays. So another very uh, tricks that you can understand, you can say that if you want to get the last item of a list or an array, and you don't know how long the list is, because for example, we have this list of actually 6 items, and we might not know how long the array actually is. So if we want to get the last item of the array, normally what we do is this would give us the last, which is the number 1, which is the value number 1. So similarly, okay, you cannot see it, let's write it here. Similarly, if we do -2, it's going to give me the second last, and so on, if we do it like this. So this is one thing that you should know about indexing in a list or an array. Another thing is that if we have an example of, for example, an unsorted list like this, we can add to it, make the list more longer. We can remove it, remove lists, remove items from the list. We can replace numbers, for example. If we want to replace this 2 by another 3 for maybe, so we can just define this position to be, and like define it as 3. So what it becomes is this 2 becomes 3. This is what we call as replacing an index. We can like add it. There's a, in Python there's an append function. So um, this is a operator, and we will go through this like this. If we do a dot append and like another number, like for example 5, this would produce, this would add the number 5 at the end of the list, making it a bit longer. So we are adding it to the end of the list. There are ways to add it in the middle of the list as well, and we can also like pop from the list. So there's another thing called pop. So pop, we give it the number of the index, and that specific number is like taken out of the list, so we can remove, add, replace any of the items of the list or array. Lists are very common for iterating over, because for example, if we have, and again the example that we are like using here, so we can use a for loop to access all of these information in a loop. So that is a very good thing about lists. So as we have seen it in our loop video, so for I in a, so this, what this does is actually like it loops over each of these elements in the list one by one, and when it finishes it gets out of the loop, of course. So if we just write print I, what it will do is like, firstly the I will be equal to number 3, so it will just print 3, and when the loop starts again, I will equal to number 9, and then it will give the value of 9 and the 5 and so on. So we can iterate over lists and do all sorts of things when we create and use lists in our program. So it's a very important concept, and we will learn more about like lists and arrays. We will use a lot of arrays when we are training neural networks in the future, and then I think we will have a better idea how useful these actually are. Um, so I don't think I have like I should talk a lot more about this basic topic. So in the next video we are going to be talking about dictionaries and the key value data structures that we like briefly talked about in the data types video. We are going to get a bit more in depth. Till then, you can subscribe, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.